And welcome everyone to this edition of Smarter Sourcing. My name is John Pavia, and today we are here in Charleston, South Carolina with the founder and CEO of LogicSource, the leading provider of procurement services and technology. Dave, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I was going to start off, well, we always start off by asking people, tell us about your personal journey. How did you get here? But I want to start off today by saying, I was thinking about saying this was the home improvement edition of Smart Sourcing. What are we doing here in this uncompleted office building?
So thank you for being here and thank you for making the trip. And we're real excited today. And it's a day with kind of mixed emotions because as you may know, we built the company in my hometown of Norwalk, Connecticut, in an old warehouse that I used to play in when I was a kid, and I was real proud of everything we've done, and am real proud of everything we've done in Connecticut. But my wife and I decided to make the journey south in 2019, and we've had such a good time down here recruiting from some of the great universities we have in the state of South Carolina. We found this an amazing place to do business. Our clients want to visit us here, so we made a decision in the recent months to expand our operation, not abandon Connecticut, but add to it with this operation here in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. And where we are right now, as you probably saw when you came in, if you were to drop a pin and pick the ideal spot you want to be in this city, it's 151 Meeting Street. We're real happy.
You come off the highway and boom, it's a straight shot.
Yeah, so we're about to remodel this. We're meeting with the architects after we're done here today, and it's going to look like Delta and Starbucks had a baby in terms of the airport lounge and the coffee shop. It's going to be all open. The town's putting a park right behind us here, and Four Seasons is going in next door to us. We're really excited to be here.
How many people would this hold?
You know, I think on days when, you know, our policy for our employees is do whatever's best for your family when it comes to coming to work. So it flexes, but I'd say on a daily basis, today, there'd be about 20 people here, but it'll flex to 60, 70 people over time. And, you know, we'll see if we keep recruiting down here.
So before we get into LogicSource, let's go back, because I thought it was interesting that you founded the company in the town you grew up in. And I read out, it was in the headquarters is still in it, or I guess was in the building in downtown South Mill. Mm-hmm. So, but let's go back. How did this all start? Was this with sourcing procurement? Was that you sat with Franklin and Marshall and said to yourself, that's the career I want to pursue?
You know, it's a great question, and no. And you know, colleagues of mine have recently upgraded me after 16 years. They used to say I don't even know how to spell procurement. And now they say I can spell it. But I'm not a procurement guy by trade. I actually grew up in IT. My first job out of F&M was at Gartner. And one of the things I did for Gartner was ran their IBM account worldwide, and which is their largest account. I don't know if it still is, but it was. And I just became fascinated having the opportunity to fly all over the world with the IBM account. I became fascinated with how they built their retained IT outsourcing business, you know, a tech-enabled professional services business. And I thought, where else in the enterprise could you do that? And, you know, Aon and Hewitt did it in HR, and Accenture did it in finance, and obviously IBM did it in IT. And I just simply put, I thought, boy, buying stuff just kind of jumped off the page at me that if you could create economies of scale and procurement, you could create a really successful tech-enabled, you know, professional services business. And that's what we set out to do. And you know, the backstory to that too is I'm one of these guys that has goals. I write down, you know, when I'm 21, I want to make this much money. When a lot of them are financial. When I'm 30, I want to do this. And one of my goals was by the time I'm 35, I want to start my own company. And my dad was a friend and a mentor, one of my best friends in the world. And he called me in my 35th year and said, hey, you said you always hit your goals. You're 35. Wasn't one of them to start your own business. And that was the kind of final push to make me build a business plan and go for it.
How long had you been at Gartner at that point?
So I was at Gartner twice. I started my career at Gartner as an intern. I worked at Gartner until 1998. I actually went to a company called Scient, which was the we built .coms from 1998 to 2002. And then I went to Deloitte for a quick stint. And then I went back to Gartner until 2006. And then I worked for an administrative outsourcing firm where I kind of learned BPO, a company called Williams Lee, and then started this in 2009.
I see. So why indirect procurement? What was the opportunity? I always ask entrepreneurs, you know, when it comes to starting a business, and especially a successful business, you got to first identify the white space, and then either develop a product or service that fills that white space. That's the product market fit. What was it about indirect procurement that you said there's an opportunity here?
Very quick story. When I was at Scient, we were working with a company called Rad Energy out of Westchester, New York. And Rad Energy delivered oil to you live in Connecticut. Do you have oil heat?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they deliver oil to homes like yours. They deliver gas to marinas and gas stations. And a fascinating fun fact, and I always test people that are from New England. Do you have any idea how many gallons you have?
440.
All right, so you're very unique. So most people, if you interview them and say, how many gallons is your oil tank? They don't know. And fun fact, all your home oil is stick checked. So you get a bill that says you got a certain number of gallons and you pay it. It's stick checked. It's a stick. So you actually don't know. So it turns out that the industry accepts, at least back then, something like 20% slippage, which is theft. So basically every day those truck drivers go around and they fill those oil tanks and they leave a little bit left, a little bit left. By the end of the day, they have a bunch of oil or gas in the truck and they sell it for cash, off the side of the road somewhere. Yep. And
that guys do the same thing.
Yeah. So to me, that's indirect procurement, right? Because, most homeowners will pay attention to the mortgage, their car payment, their insurance bill. But when it's like the credit card. That's where all the family problems come. The Amazon bill, right? Where the leakage, the tail spend is. And in corporate America, it's the same thing. So if you're Lululemon, you're really good at buying fabric. You're really good at buying the clothes, right? If you're Tractor Supply or Titleist or Bath and Body or, Under Armour, you're really good at buying what you sell. And you better be. It's your brand promise. It's your differentiator. But when it comes to buying credit card processing services or elevator maintenance or waste management or, marketing services, you don't have the same level of domain expertise, the same level of energy systems people. And let's face it, it's not always where high potential employees go. They go to merchandising, they go to direct supply chain. Or if you're a hospital system and you're buying MRI machines or you're buying knee replacements, that's really strategic. If you're negotiating security guards or snow removal, it's less strategic. So indirect tends to be less managed, less of a focus, and less emotional. And we thought, boy, if we could start a business there, we could really make an impact. And in indirect, every dollar we save drops directly to the bottom line and funds future growth.
So I want to ask you about that because I've seen and heard the comment Priority 99. But before we get to that, I think it's important to make sure that anybody who's watching or listening understands that these are complex categories. These aren't the categories that you can GPO, like pens, pencils, light bulbs. So just to be, because, and the reason I ask is because you designed the company with a very clear vision, it seems. And so, I want you to clarify what it is that you did. You started out buying when you formed the company, what it is you do today, how much it's changed. But also, what happened in those early days? What are some of the things that you made? It was an aha moment that you had to make a pivot, had to make an acquisition, light bulb went on and said, hey, we better do this if we're going to have a big company.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. I think that the pivot example, there's been 100 of them, and it's interesting. I just was invited. I was so honored to be a guest lecturer at the University of St. Andrews on entrepreneurship, and I presented to these unbelievably bright kids from truly all over the world on what entrepreneurship's like. And these kids hear stories of Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Zuckerberg, and I guess they're entrepreneurs, but for every one of those, there's 10,000 failures, probably 20,000 failures. It's not billionaires and private jets. It's sleepless nights. It's putting your family in harm's way. It's failing over and over and over again. And
short thing is great because you get to hear some of those, how they struggle.
100%. And so those pivots, as you asked, they're constant. And there's probably going to be one this week. I mean, it's like Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. I mean, you have to start moving. Somebody I met years ago gave the analogy, if you're lost in the woods, you assume water's downhill. So you just start going downhill and all of a sudden the grade goes up again. You change direction, but you figure it out. Heuristic modeling. You just point your feet in one direction and start going and you sense, learn, and respond. And that's early stage. So over the years, we started this with a thesis that if we could help marketing people, the theory was marketing folks are emotional. I'm one of them. They're emotional. They like shiny things.
Everybody thinks they're a marketer.
Everybody thinks they're a marketer.
CFO thinks they can market anything.
100%. And they tend to not like to spend a lot of time negotiating. They want what they want. So our thesis was if we can help marketers, then everything gets a little bit easier. And so we started in marketing, And we realized, that was right, but that budget as a percentage of overall indirect spend is kind of smaller. So we need a bigger basket. So then we extended into the stores, a lot of our retailers, fixtures, flooring, lighting. And then from there, we extended into distribution and logistics. How do I move these things around? And then IT. And so we did it thoughtfully over time, but every one of those was a pivot. Industries have been a pivot. I mean, it's been a lot of stuff that we've had to revisit.
So let's take a typical use case, because the first thing that comes to mind is you get a big company and you have a lot of name brand clients. I mean, lots of companies that anybody listening or watching is going to recognize. These companies already have in-house procurement, most of them. When you say you bring, LogicSource brings rigor along the buying process, because to me, I think that's one of the values you guys bring, especially to a company that they seem to have plenty of people in procurement. Why do you guys come and how can you add value?
So it's a couple of things there. So one, still to this day, I'm surprised at the underinvestment in indirect procurement. I'm surprised at some of the lack of investment in direct procurement, but indirect is still woefully underinvested. If you listen to a Hackett or Institute for Supply Chain Management, they would tell you about 1.25% of spend under management should be your budget for sourcing and procurement. I've never seen a company come even close. So one, I see organizations every day now that still have no professional procurement.
Big.
I'm talking about 10 to 20 billion in revenue. Yeah. And you'd be blown away. So we're still doing transformational type outsourcing where we're going in and building. We do a lot of build, operate, transfer. We stand up professional procurement, operate it, and then transfer it back. And yes, some of those household brands, that's the case. And I think some of it is because they've grown so quickly that they were focused on the customer and they were focused on market, penetration. And then eventually they came back around and focused on the plumbing and the foundation. So still to this day. But what differentiates the thing is that I had a CFO client of mine years ago. I got in a great argument, publicly traded, $12 billion company. And he said, well, I already have a procurement department and I have an e-auction tool. And, I already bottomed out the market. And we were fighting. I mean, we were just going round and round. And finally I said to him, what kind of car do you drive? And he said, why? I said, what kind of car do you drive? And he said, I have a 7 Series BMW. I said, lease it or buy it? He said, I lease it. I said, right. I said, you're pretty good at negotiating. He goes, yeah, I'm CFO. But yeah, I'm pretty good. I said, I bet you got a great deal. He said, I got a great deal. I said, let me ask you a question. If I had a fleet of 2007 Series BMWs, you think I'd get a bit better deal than you? And he said, well, I said, I'm not done. What if I also had a fleet of 2005 Series BMWs and I had a fleet of 2003 Series BMWs and I had a commercial deal with BMW and I bought trucks and, all right, I get it. Right? So, but you only buy what you buy. So there's two things you don't hear a lot about in procurement. One is just truly leverage. If you only buy what you buy, somebody with a bigger basket, like a Gap Inc. probably spends $500-600 million on overnight parcel, UPS, FedEx. If you're Viore, you can be the best negotiator in the world, but if you're spending $20 million, Gap's going to get a better deal than you. The second thing that people don't talk about is frequency. If you negotiated that 7 Series once and you signed a 3-year lease, you're out of the market. So when you go to negotiate it again, you got to relearn everything you just taught yourself. A client of ours might negotiate, a software license agreement with Microsoft every 3 years. We're doing 40 this month. So frequency, like you wouldn't go to a doctor for a hip surgery that does 1 every 6 months. You want to go to HSS in Manhattan where they're doing 30 a month.
When you get to the larger companies, how much of it also is, because I saw this in my prior life, where the procurement guys, they get comfortable in the job, they're buying lots of things of it, but then they get to know their vendors, and then it becomes more transactional than it does real sourcing, real adding some competitive tension there. So how often do you guys come into a situation and what you bring is, sure, you bring great sourcing skills, but on top of that, just add some competitive tension to an organization that they've gotten so comfortable that they're just sort of transacting every day?
Look, it's all the time. And sourcing and procurement folks, one of our CPOs said this, I thought it was really interesting. They said, indirect procurement is like remodeling an antique home. And he said, nobody can afford to do it all at once. So they go room to room. but the materials and the structure is so old that by the time they do the whole house, they got to start again. And you know, just don't have time to do it all. So it's really common that we're coming into organizations where they just haven't had the time to get at the stuff that they need to negotiate. So it's easy to become complacent and say, well, that's good enough for now. We negotiated that 3 years ago. So there's evergreen clauses and automatic. So cost avoidance is a huge issue in the market right now. And I would say to anybody listening, I'm seeing this bad trend of CFOs and private equity firms dismissing cost avoidance and saying, I don't want to count that. I only want to count CapEx and OpEx P&L savings. I understand why you want the P&L savings, but today's cost avoidance is tomorrow's OpEx. It's tomorrow's EBITDA. And with this inflation environment we're in, this tariff environment we're in, and with small underinvested procurement teams, you're going to start seeing cost avoidance. So, and I'll give you an example. In 2023, there was over 30 publicly traded SaaS software companies in the United States. In 2024, there was 3. So all those software companies are raising price because they can't sell as much as they were. And that's where you're going to see that cost avoidance. So if your team isn't driving down, and that's where complacency, to your question, that's a real problem.
So when you start the company, and even to today, you have a unique model in that you go in and you guys do a full assessment. And the reason I bring this up is because I've seen assessments done before by other, I'll call them third parties consulting firms. And, some are pretty good, but you can tell this is sort of a template that they have. They punch in numbers and they fill the template in, and it spits out a nice looking report. I've seen some of the reports that you guys have produced. These are substantial documents. They go really deep, and you don't charge anything for them, and you don't make the prospective customer commit to anything. So to me, it's a little bit about a high wire act without a net, because you're taking a lot of risk there, because you're putting, these things take lots of man hours to create. So tell me about how you came up with the model, and has it worked? It obviously has, but I want to hear about it.
Yeah, it's a hardy perennial in board meetings. I've had 4 distinct boards in this journey, and I've fought off 100 times. We should charge for the assessment. McKinsey would charge, Bain would charge, BCG would charge.
It's a McKinsey style, Deloitte style report that comes out, and it's free.
Yeah. What's interesting is I had it'd kill me if I say his name, but I had a very senior person at McKinsey tell me we couldn't reproduce this if we tried. A couple of things here. So one, look, the management consultants charge for the PowerPoint. They get paid for the PowerPoint. So it's beautiful. By the way, if you line them all up in a row, it's about 12%. They're going to tell you they can save you. So I can save you money right now. They're going to say 12%. And when you don't save it, they're going to say it's your fault. And because the board hired them, no one's ever going to hear that they missed. They're going to hear that you missed. And how many folks have to touch this hot stove before they realize the playbook? And right now it's fascinating in management consulting. You saw McKinsey fired 3,000 people a week ago. It's happening all over the place. By the way, I thought it was absolutely brilliant that McKinsey fired 3,000 people and blamed AI. How much you want to bet that week they signed about 20 AI strategy contracts, but they didn't have their own. So they're sending kids into your organization to do what we call 3 bids in a cloud of dust. They're bidding out your work, and it's a blunt instrument. They're hitting people about the head. So their assessment is beautiful. It says 10 to 12%. It's not based on volume. They don't buy anything. It's not based on actual reality being in the market. It's just 12%. Who can't say 12%? We'll just go beat your suppliers about that. So I get asked often, hey, we have McKinsey in here. Can you deliver this? And we'll come in and come outside. So what we do, and I always joke with my CFO clients, I'm too dumb to do it any other way. I kind of have to do the work. These management consultants are so smart, they just figured out it's 12% across the board for everybody. We do the work. So we literally look at, what do you buy? Who buys it? Why do you buy it? How much do you pay for it? We look at specs. We look at invoices. We look at seasonality. We look at demand management. We look at how work gets done. So I don't squeeze the balloon and it pops out somewhere else. So that in my very simple way of thinking of this, it's a dartboard. And the more data I get, the more work I can do on my nickel, the closer I am to the bullseye. So I can look my client in the eye and say, I'm right. I know exactly what you buy. I know why you buy it. I know who you buy it from. And I even know things like, hey, this supplier invested in us during COVID. They were there for us. They took a pay cut. They shipped things for free. They found things for us. So we're not going to negotiate that hard with them because they're a really good partner. Like, you got to know all that stuff to do this right. And that's what we do in that assessment. And what I've found is doing it on our nickel does a couple of things for the client. It shows them that we're willing to put skin in the game. It shows them that we're willing to invest in them and prove that we're right before they pay us. It does a couple things for us too. I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, hey, do me a favor, change that. Don't say that to my boss. No, I'm working on my nickel. That's the right answer for your company, and I'm not going to change it because you don't want me to say this isn't working well. And it's been, look, we're winning 93% of the time.
I was gonna say, how often does someone say, thanks for the free report, but we're taking a pass?
7% of the time, lifetime batting average. Now that I've seen that go to 0 in a year. I've seen it go to 30% in a year. And honestly, it's our fault when it goes low. That means I always tell prospective clients, I have two burdens. I'm going to work for free. It's going to cost me about $75,000 to $250,000 to do this assessment for you.
And that's in man hours of people.
Yeah. And we fly, we don't charge. I mean, we should, but very often we just don't. With a pushback, we don't do it. So we have two major burdens when we do this work for our prospective clients. Burden number one is when you're done looking at this work we've done over 5 weeks, am I right? Like, do you believe? You look at it and say, yeah, I see how this is going to matriculate to my P&L. I understand the work that's required. I'm a believer. But the second burden is, do you believe you need something from us to go get it? And there's been times where we've been right. You know, there's 33% savings on packaging. I always pick on my friend Billy Bishop at Blue Buffalo. He's the one that got away, and he's a friend. Another Connecticut company, great family, great brand. And we helped them save a substantial amount of money on packaging. We were right, but he didn't need us to go get it. He just called his suppliers and said, hey, change the price. So that happens sometimes.
So who's your biggest competition? Is it the McKinsey's, Deloitte's, Accenture's, or is it the in-house do-it-yourself guys saying to the boss, we don't need these guys coming in here and messing around in the sandbox?
Okay, so I was thinking competition, and you're a former prosecutor. I was thinking of competition like I'm in a deposition. Don't show me the Gartner PowerPoint. Who do you actually compete with? Right? So in 16 years of doing this, I've never competed with Accenture or IBM, ever. On paper, on the old Gartner slide, I should be seeing them every day. Under deposition, penalty of death, never seen them once in one of my deals. I see do-it-yourselfers, in-house procurement. We can be threatening in-house procurement, and we shouldn't be. I'm trying to get them more budget. As I just said, their staff isn't big enough.
Is not going to be threatened by it because they're naturally going to say, and I heard the expression, turkeys don't vote for Thanksgiving, which I think is a great line. So could you explain it? But I guess the real question is when you just said the in-house guys should not fear you. Why? Because you naturally think, well, they're going to feel like you're grading home.
The single largest reason 1 through 5 that in-house chief procurement officers or heads of procurement have opportunity for improvement is they're underfunded. They don't have enough domain expertise. They don't have the right systems. They don't have the right remit, which is really important. How many CPOs, honestly, if you're listening or watching this, can say you can tell the CIO or the CMO or the head of store development or the head of, design and construction what to do? You can't. Your CFO can, your COO can. So, and then I go into countless organizations where the head of procurement isn't called the right thing. They don't report to the right person. They don't have the right budget. So a lot of what we're going to do, and I give Gartner a lot of credit for it. Gartner figured this out decades ago. They created the CIO. I mean, if you go back, we're both old enough to remember the MIS director pushing an AV cart with screwdrivers in their pocket. Well, they gave that AV card away. They gave Xerox the screwdrivers. They gave the data center to IBM, and they went upstairs and they started talking about innovation and security and risk, and they became the CIO. The procurement is wrong as a title. Procurement assumes there's a buy. Somebody made a decision down the hall, and you're executing on the buy. Like, that's not what you're doing. It really is about productivity. It's about spend management. So we're going to go in and say, Mr. and Mrs. CFO, You call your procurement leader the wrong thing. You don't pay them the right thing. They don't have the right staff. They don't have the right resources. And considering all that, they're doing a hell of a job. Like, imagine if they actually had the tools. But even then, in-house, you need to have access to third parties. This is why firms use Gartner. They need more data. They need more information. So having a partner in someone like LogicSource to help you with, we have 160 billion of spend data running through the firm. So when I can hand an in-house procurement organization benchmarks to show them what everybody else is paying, or I can show them what 60 different terms and conditions look like for a SaaS agreement, we're going to make them better. And, I think the single largest mark of intelligence is curiosity. And I think the CPOs that are really curious and want that help, we end up being great partners.
So the people you have within LogicSource, they are people that came out of consulting firms, or people that came out of other large procurement organizations and actually have hands-on experience. Which is it?
Yeah, I mean, the edgy, honest answer is we think of we need some pretty PowerPoints too. So for about every 20 employees, we hire one person that came from management consulting, so we can make things look nice. But most of our folks, and I'm teasing a little bit, most of our folks are from industry. They either were supply chain executives, they were procurement leaders, they were category leaders in large organizations, or they came from the manufacturing or the supply side, and they know how things are made, they know where the margin is. So if in our center of excellence, a lot of those folks come from the companies they negotiate with because they know how they price. They know how they manufacture things. They know where the value engineering is. And on the category side, look, we're a cool job for procurement professionals because you work with 40, 80, 90 companies a year versus one, and you're always getting more spend to play with, which if you like buying stuff for a living and you love negotiating, having a lot of spend that keeps growing is a lot of fun. The kids in consulting that they graduated from Harvard a week ago, and now they've got a sport coat and a McKinsey badge, and they do 3 bids in a cloud of dust to save money. I think you and I have laughed about this in an off-camera conversation, but I'm a big fan of the show Gold Rush. I know my wife makes fun of me. I'm a geek. I watch Discovery Channel. But when you're mining for gold, they have the old way they would do it is they run these huge dredges, which is basically a barge that runs right down the middle of a body of water, and it digs up everything under it. Well, the problem with a barge is it's hard to move, so it loses all the gold on the sides. So these old timers ran these dredges down the middle, and these young guys now are going back to places like Alaska, and they're remining because the dredge only dug so deep and it only went so wide. That's what 3 bids in a cloud of dust does. It gets like the first layer of gold off the riverbed, but most of the gold is 20 feet down and you got to excavate. And that's our business, is really excavating to the bottom of bedrock to save all the money, not just hit and move on. It's not a sustainable strategy. And by the way, when you just do 3 bids and get the lowest price, you're not taking into account relationship, quality, service, tenure, things like we mentioned before around we invested in you during hard times, et cetera. So what ends up happening is the suppliers don't like you because you're just beating them about the head. And your business stakeholders don't like you because you're undervaluing the things that are important to them, like relationship and quality and all that stuff. And they don't like that.
I know some clients don't like their names used, but the ones that don't mind it, can you tell us who some of your clients are?
Yeah, we have a couple of different businesses. So in retail, we have awesome clients like Lululemon, Bath and Body Works, Tractor Supply, Aritzia. We've done amazing work with Under Armour, Gap, brands like that, the Caleres. There's a whole bunch of them that are, I like to think of our retail business as we have healthy retail. We have focused on the ones that aren't giving back market share, the ones that are growing, high growth retail. In CPG, we have great brands like Titleist. We've done great work with Hasbro. We've done work with Mars, really great firms. And then we opened up a health and life sciences business 3 years ago, and it's now 62% of our pipeline. And, we do awesome work alongside Cleveland Clinic. They've been a partner of ours for the 3-year journey. We work with great medical centers like WellSpan Health, Alina, SSM, Scion, Greater Baltimore, et cetera. So that's been a really cool journey for us because helping hospital systems, increases the quality of health in our communities, which is a lot of fun.
So just to be clear, so that everyone who's watching and listening understands what LogicSource is focused on and what it's not, you saw the opportunity in indirect procurement, but not in the pencils, paper, the things you can GPO. You were focused on the complex categories within the direct, correct?
It's a great question. And we do both. But the GPOs are a fascinating area for me. So I'm sure everybody that's listening knows, but a group purchasing organization is basically an outsourced sales organization for typically commodities. So, you and I could start a GPO tomorrow. We could go call on Train and say, hey, give us a pricing grid that ticks down in price the more volume we get, because we're going to go out and we're going to sell people to buy off your Train agreement. For Train, it sleeves out of their vest. You guys want to go, I don't pay you anything up front. You want to go sell people to use my pricing, go ahead. And they pay you less than they pay salespeople commissions, so go ahead. And we get 3% of whatever volume on average 3%, and whatever volume goes through Train in this example. So there's countless GPOs that are essentially outsourced sales organizations that are just selling clients to buy off of their agreements. Nobody said they're good agreements. They're just buy off my agreement. And they get paid 3%. So right off the bat, we can save 3% on every single one of those because they're getting a commission. But then they typically don't buy very well. And I mentioned before Gap Inc. buying 500-600 million of small parcel. They're going to get a better deal on small parcel than a GPO's FedEx deal. So I think industries have gotten, certain industries have gotten smart about this. I think retail, consumer packaged goods, insurance, they've figured out this GPO thing. There's a time and place for it. It's typically small companies. So if you're a $300 million retailer and you want to try to get a better deal, a GPO is a great idea. If you're our clients, Lulu, Tractor Supply, Bath and Body, you already have a better deal. Where it's really odd is in the health system space. And this has been fascinating to me because I'm new to healthcare. They are wildly over-reliant on their GPOs. And they have this weird, what I consider, it's like the federal tax system. So these health systems will say, well, I don't want to go away from my GPO because I get a rebate check back at the end of the year. And it'd be like me saying to you and your wife, I can lower your taxes. And you say, no. We get this great check back at the end of the year. It's your money. So the GPOs have a place. They're a tool. And you think about like the military, they're one branch. It's a tool you want to bring out to save money. It tends to be a fast, blunt instrument for, as you said, office supply, commodities, rental cars, things like that. We decided to focus on all of it. But our real magic is highly complex categories that are constantly changing. IT, marketing, packaging, distribution, logistics. It's always moving. Because once it's commoditized, it's what we call a set and forget category.
So in your process, I saw that you have a vision session where you need to get aligned with the stakeholders' vision where they want to go. So tell us about that, because that's not something you normally see in some processes.
It's really material to what we do because and again, you have to kind of understand, what do you want to accomplish? What is it you're trying to get out of this? And by the way, it's not always about savings. So sometimes they're saying, look, I have business continuity. I got a real scar across my back from COVID. I ran out of things and I couldn't stay open. I couldn't keep my employees safe. Business continuities. And think about that storm that hit North Carolina last year, and Baxter's, IV plant slid off a hillside no one would have ever thought was in harm's way. They were one of 2 IV plants in the country. So business continuity has become much, much more serious. And I think when you look at what Trump's doing, no political commentary at all, but this tariff conversation is scary for some of our clients that manufacture near 100% of their products in China, for example. You have to have alternative supply routes. You have to have alternative options. Think about when the war broke out in Ukraine. I don't know if you know this, but if almost all Porsche, Audi, and VW wiring harnesses were made in the Ukraine. So I had a buddy, I don't have his kind of money, but he bought a 911 Turbo. It only came with 1 key. So you buy a 200, I don't know how much they cost, a few $100,000 car, comes with 1 key, because they're made in Ukraine, they only have a couple of them left. So you have to have alternative supply. So it's not always about savings. So that visioning session helps us understand, what are you trying to get out of this? And it gets into so much more than savings: policy, team, the brand of procurement, executive control. Do we want to have a command and control environment? Do we want to tell people we have to do this? Or do we want to bring people along over time? Do we want to be great at procurement in-house? So we do a lot of build, operate, transfer. Brands like Lululemon,
which a lot of consultants would never do.
But brands like Lululemon, their culture is paramount to that company. And they don't want a third party doing it. They want to get good at it. and then give them control back of it. And that's exactly what we've done. We've been with them for almost 7 years, helping them get good at this. So you find all that out in those visioning sessions. But by the way, that doesn't mean that's the right answer for them. We have other clients that say, no, I've got so much to do. I don't want to be good at indirect procurement. I want somebody to be good at it. You do it. You know?
That's a good segue to what I wanted to ask before we move on to what's next for LogicSource. And that is, I just saw this podcast on procrastination. And in fact, I started...
Were my kids in it?
Well, yeah, exactly. But I said to myself, let me watch this later. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what this thing's probably about. So when I think about LogicSource and everything you've described, and you produce this great report that I think any CFO, any CPO would want. You do it for free. There's no commitment. Do you feel sometimes that LogicSource is that New Year's resolution that people are like, I'm going to join the gym. And then they put it, and it's because like restaurant guys, right? Restaurant guys, they leave the back of and in my prior life, you'd be amazed at, and I'm not going to mention names, but some of the name brand restaurants around the country, some of the stuff in the back of the house that gets ignored. Why? Because the CEO, what is he concerned or she concerned with? The front of the house, the menu, right? So the back of the house always gets ignored. It's indirect procurement sometimes like that thing that I know I got to get to it. I know it's the tailspin, but it's not the sexy stuff. So it gets delayed. It gets procrastination galore.
It's that and so many other things. It is, in a nutshell, I have so many people say to me, like, you, for free, you tell companies how much money you can save them, and then they pay you to do it, and you give them a multiple of your fee as a risk backstop. This must be the easiest job in the world. And, I have a lot of buddies that work in banking or working, and it is shockingly hard to save companies money, shockingly hard. And the reasons are everything under the sun. I used to be stunned. I don't think I can be surprised anymore. The reasons that I've heard over the years, it's incredibly difficult to save people money. And it's even harder in mission-based cultures. So, now that we're in healthcare, I'm looking at, I have profit-based cultures and I have mission-based cultures I'm dealing with. And it's incredibly difficult because it requires some level of change, some level of risk, appetite. You have to be uncomfortable pushing and challenging your colleagues. And if you interviewed 1,000 salespeople and asked them, have you ever gotten a phone call at the end of the year that your client said, hey, I've got budget. Can you sell me something? Because if I don't spend it, I'm going to lose it. If you interview 1,000 salespeople, I bet you 1,000 people have a story, at least one for you.
Right.
I had at Gartner, when I was in sales at Gartner, every year, we call them bluebirds. Phone rings, December 13th. Hey, I'm going to lose this 50 grand. Sell me some tickets to symposium. Sell me something. That corporate culture, that wait, you're not rewarded if you spend less than your budget. You should make more money. You should make a bonus.
So is this what you call Priority 99?
Well, it's interesting. So Priority 99 was a direct quote from a CEO client of mine, and he was in a company that was hurting, really hurting, giving back market share at an alarming rate. And by the way, they didn't make it ultimately. When I first met him, a dear friend of mine, who was also a dear friend of his, said, take a meeting with Dave, and he did it sight unseen. He didn't know who I was. And when I met with him, he gave me a 30-minute meeting, and an hour and 45 minutes later, we were still talking. And he said, when you came in, I thought, indirect procurement, what is my friend thinking? Why are you wasting my time right now? Like, I'm taking on water. I don't know if I can keep this thing afloat. And I'm here talking about indirect procurement. And he said, I realized after an hour and 45 minutes of talking, he was direct quote. He said, I realized after an hour and 45 minutes of talking to you, it's priority 99. So it wasn't wrong, but it'll fund priority 1 through 4. And that really stuck out to me. I don't need to be priority 1 through 4. I don't need to be cool and sexy. The business is kind of dirty fingernails, pitch and shovel kind of business, but it'll fund the really cool stuff.
So let's stick with use cases and examples. Like, just to do a couple, because I like the line that you guys have, which is, we'll do it with you or for you. So if you could, by way of giving examples of real life clients, whether you can name them or not, maybe it'd be helpful to give examples on both sides where you did it with you and for you.
Sure. And we do the middle, which we call a hybrid, which is, so I'll give you a couple examples. So great example, and I'll give you 2 great examples of with you, and they're 2 great leaders. So Mike Peel at Columbia Sportswear is just a world-class procurement leader, and he runs a real tight ship of really capable procurement people. And we partnered with Mike and his CFO and showed him, look, you're underinvested in procurement. So if we do this with you, our kind of one-to-many model, because we have 170 people in a shared service center, and all this data we have going through us, we can get you domain expertise in every category alongside your great domain expertise you already have in certain categories for a substantially cheaper kind of approach. And then Jen Cicinelli at Tractor Supply, same thing. Jen's on a journey to build professional procurement. And she just showed me the stats last week. I'll butcher them, but I mean, just suffice it to say, her spend under management has gone from a very small percentage to a very large percentage. Her procurement resources, again, small to large, and the amount of savings and value she's driving with her partnership with Kurt Barton, their CFO. So that with you model, Mike Peel in procurement at Columbia Sportswear, Jim Swanson as CFO, and LogicSource kind of together, all under one name on the jersey, Columbia Sportswear. There's no LogicSource. And same thing at Tractor Supply. Jen and her CFO, Kurt Barton, and LogicSource, it's all one logo, Tractor Supply. We go together, attack, categories and drive savings and make those decisions. So those with you examples are a ton of fun. And there's a bunch, it's about half my portfolio. On the for you side, we have awesome clients like Bath & Body, with the exception of distribution logistics, we're their procurement department. And we have an amazing partnership with Eva Barada, their CFO, and with all the business stakeholders. And that was a really transformational, hard deal. Titleist, we do all of indirect for them. And some of our hospital clients like WellSpan, it's all non-med surge that we do. Same thing with a client like Scion but there's not a wrong answer. It's what's right for your culture.
So we mentioned WellSpan. The pivot to healthcare in the last couple of years was an interesting one. And I think it took a while to ramp, and now it seems like it's flying. So you touched on it before, but let's go back to it for a second. What is it? What are you seeing in the healthcare industry what did you see? And now that you're in it for a few years, what are you seeing in terms of the opportunity for a LogicSource?
So I'd say the macro issue that is really, and we should all be alarmed as some citizens, consumers, maybe we're getting a little older. If you think about what a high-end fashion brand, for example, can do in a tariff environment or an inflationary environment, they can't do it. So a lot of these health systems can't raise prices. They're limited by the state that they're in. So they just take it on the chin. So if prices go up, they can't pass it on to the consumer. So they either have to cut staff, which in their business means at an absolute minimum, really hard to deal with for claims and appointments and things of that nature, but at a maximum, nursing and capability. We might have to close, the eye clinic or the heart clinic, whatever it may be, or they have to downsize the ratio of patients to doctors and nurses to doctors. So it's really alarming what they have to do. So there's an urgency there that they need to drive cost savings as fast as they can, and ideally not on the stuff that's going in your body. You don't want your hospital cutting cost on the MRI machine or on the knee replacement or on the heart valve. But the snow removal and the window cleaning and the security guards and the software license. And so that's one big thing we saw right away, is that they need it badly. And we're doing a real good thing when we can help them. And we are helping our communities have better health care. And it's amazing. And that's not a marketing shtick. It's true. And it's really cool. And I've never been able to say that until we started this business in healthcare a couple years ago. The other thing, one of our healthcare executives, CFO, said this, and he was so right. Hospitals get wedding pricing. And when he said it, I said, come again? And he said, we all know the tent doesn't cost that much. We know the flowers don't cost that much. And we know the photographer doesn't cost that much. But my daughter's getting married. So now all of a sudden it's 4X what it would be on any other given Wednesday for a tent or a photographer. And I got to tell you, with empirical data, I can show you same supplier, retailer, hospital, CPG, hospital, insurance, hospital. Hospitals get crushed. They don't get good pricing. And if there's anywhere you're going to give a discount, you'd think you'd give it to your community where they're providing healthcare to your friends and neighbors and family.
How is AI changing business? It has it already.
The jury's still out, right? So AI is obviously, I grew up during, as you lived through the dot-com era too. I left Gartner and went to Scient during the dot-com boom, and the whole world was going to be automated. And then remember, print was going to die. You were at R. Donnelly for a bit. It's
So yeah, it was dying back then.
still alive.
Still alive.
You think of internet retail. But by the way, internet retail is I think 28% of retail now. It's still not 50, 60%. So I think AI is going to have an impact. I think it is having an impact. I think what it's going to do is help us do things quicker. But the more people that participate in artificial intelligence, the less intelligent it gets too. When it started, it was all billionaires playing with artificial intelligence, so it was as smart as all the billionaires. Now, every time one of us says, hey, can you make the guy that's interviewing me look like a cartoon character? It's like, would you like Disney or Pixar? The dumber we make this thing, I think that it gets a little risky. I think there's a place for it. I think it can help us with contractual negotiations. I think it can help us. We're using it to automate our data so that today what takes human beings a couple days, weeks, we can do in seconds. But I still need the human beings that actually know the category. And I'm learning this firsthand myself right now. We're in a huge project with Tiger Analytics to weaponize, my words, our data so that I can immediately click and give benchmarks. But my domain experts are teaching the machine. And I know where our domain experts came from, and I know what they cost, and I know how good they are. It terrifies me to think what other firms are teaching the machine. Because, you had a stint in facilities. I mean, the nuance, waste management, actuarials, and geography. And is it biohazard or is it, there's really nuanced stuff that if you don't have a deep domain expert teaching that machine and then checking its work, I think it's going to make things faster. I think it also, in a weird way, may make some dumb things happen.
Such as?
Like morons teach the machine.
Yeah, it's junk in, junk out, right? It's the same thing. So let's stick with that for a second, because as I speak with CFOs, chief procurement officers, I've heard some dumb stories about AI. I've heard some really impressive stories about AI in trying to forecast what's around the next corner, whether it's lumber shortage, egg shortage. It's amazing. Some companies, some CFOs and some peers that I've interviewed, how they've actually used AI and they were ready for the egg crisis. Well, you guys must, I would think, you spend a lot of time thinking about what's around the next corner, because as world events happen, I would imagine it impacts the ebb and flow of customers reaching out to you and saying, we need your help tomorrow, versus them sitting back saying everything's good. So we have tariffs going on right now. We had the pandemic a couple of years ago. Start with the pandemic. How did the pandemic affect you guys? And then you can move it as you like towards what we're dealing with tariffs.
Just the first thing I'll say with the pandemic is I made a mistake once not clarifying what I meant. And so ultimately what I said was the pandemic was good for us. And I don't mean families and lost loved ones. It was terrible. But it's a business question of how we handled the pandemic and what the pandemic did to us. And anybody listening, stay with me when I said it was good for us, because we lost 43% of our revenue in 2 weeks when the pandemic hit. And so we started the year, it was a fascinating year. We started the year at a certain revenue number. We lost 43%, and we came back up and finished the year at the exact same revenue number, all in the same fiscal year. But what happened was a couple of things we had been wanting to do, we were able to do. We had been wanting to diversify off retail because we were just in retail at the time. And the drug of distressed retail is hard to say no to. So you'd get a retailer that was close to the edge that needed help, and you can make money doing that. And everybody that was giving up market share went down in the first 2 weeks. So that 43% of revenue like that was an awesome kick in the pants to say, you've been talking about diversifying, do it. You've been talking about focusing on healthy retail, not distressed, do it. We've been talking about data and software, do it. And so it was this amazing catalyst that you're in fight or flight mode, you got to do it. So it ended up being unbelievable for us. The other thing it did for us culturally was I was a bit of a hall monitor, if I'm honest. I would sit in the halls of the company, and if at 5 o'clock somebody wasn't in their office, I'd be like, what's going on? And It completely changed our culture. Our employees are incredible. Our policies do whatever's best for your family. They're working all over the place and they're doing great work. And our productivity went up. And we track utilization of every employee. So it's empirical data that our productivity went up. So it was amazing for us on so many levels. And we've really never looked back since then. We also hardened as a team that we learned that we thought luckily it would be harder than everybody thought it would be. Remember when they thought it was going to be May? We thought it was going to be at least a year, and thank God we were right about that. So the pandemic was good in that regard for us. We also have always prioritized benefits for our employees as the number one thing. We pay almost 100% of our employees' benefits, and we have Cadillac benefits. And it's been very important to me as a father of a special needs child, as born as a micro preemie. I've always wanted that, and it was great that we had great benefits and everybody was able to manage through it. A lot of water under the bridge at this point.
So I want to talk about how you guys get rewarded for what you do, because it's a weird business. And coming from the facilities industry, like you talked about, it's one of those categories where you can come into a client that they have thousands of locations across the country, and you're managing the process much better than they were doing it before in terms of first time fix, duration, price. But now, instead of deferring work, you're making sure things get fixed. So from a CFO's perspective, he gets the bill at the end of the year and he's like, you blew my budget. And you're like, yeah, but your prices were much better. Durations were much shorter, much higher on first time fix. So how do you guys get compensated? And is the model a percentage of savings model, or is it a retainer model?
So I thought you were going somewhere else, but I like where you're going. So and yeah, you're right. Every time we recommend integrated facilities maintenance and repair to our clients, we have to warn the cost might go up because you haven't been repairing your stores at all. Right. I mean, you remember back in the day, Dwayne Reed's pest policy was shelter cats. Yeah. True story.
That's true.
And you start cleaning the stores, you start actually cleaning the bathroom, and yeah, your costs will go up, but your long-term,
right,
HVAC maintenance and all that. Our world, we're typically fee for service. So I'm seeing it as management consulting firms get pressed, and they are right now. You can read it in the paper. They're starting to do more gain share deals because they have all these kids they just hired out of school that they have to pay. So they're doing more gain share deals. Gain share deals, don't do it. Anybody listening, don't do it. Gain share incentivizes all the wrong behavior. Your partner is only going to work on things that are high value. They only care about savings. You have to take into consideration quality, service, relationship, tenure. You're going to hate each other and fight over benchmarking and fight over what the baseline is. They're terrible business models. So we typically get a fee for service. But to give our clients that skin in the game, we'll usually give them a multiple of our fee as a backstop. So, I guarantee I'll save you what I make. I guarantee I'll save you 2x what I make, or I'll rebate back. And typically that gives our clients that anti-embarrassment clause that they need to know that they've got, procurement's free if we don't at least pay for ourselves, a few times over. The other piece to how we get paid that has been fascinating, and I mentioned before, it's really incredibly hard to save people money. One of the things, think about private wealth management. You made a couple bucks in your life, you have somebody manage it for you, and there's a return you're expecting. I have been stunned by how many clients of ours focus on what it costs versus the value. So, I can go into a client where I might be making $4 million a year and I'm saving $100 million net. And they're like, yeah, but you're making $4 million. You're making $100 million net. And then I think they don't understand, I'm not making $4 million. I'm not making $4 million. I've got 13 people on site. I've got, whatever it may be. And we have clients that range from $500,000 a year to $10 million a year and everybody in between. But the ROI expectations, and this is where GPOs and also where direct procurement become noise in the system. If you're negotiating hot dogs for Costco, I don't know how many they sell a year, but let's take a wild guess that they sell millions. If you negotiate 10 cents off of every hot dog and then you multiply it by millions, then you can get an ROI of 10x, 12x, whatever it may be, because you're doing one negotiation that costs you a very little amount of money and then you're buying off of it in millions. And it's highly predictable because they sell a certain amount of hot dogs every year. That doesn't work in credit card processing. It doesn't work in an advertising agency or your audit partner. Or I always think of something like snow removal. We go to great pains to negotiate your snow removal and then it doesn't snow. So ROI, 3x ROI in indirect procurement is good. 10x is almost unheard of. So folks out there have got to separate direct from indirect. It's a different animal. And I think a lot of folks get caught up in that.
So football played a big part in your life. Your dad played for the Patriots for a short time, I believe. You played into college. If you had to pick one person, sight unseen, given the responsibilities of the position by definition, and you had to pick one person to draft off of a football team and put them into LogicSource, what position would it be and why?
Bill Belichick's girlfriend. Because somehow she can get people to do crazy things. And we would be so much bigger if I could convince her to help me.
We are keeping that answer.
I mean, she has secret human powers. That's a great question. So a couple things. Yeah, my dad was a backup tackling dummy, walk-on back in the day when, you loaded fish on the docks during the day and then you walked on at night. And they played in Fenway Park back then. I played in high school. I was terrible. My father never said it, but I'm sure he was like, where'd this kid come from? And I played for half a minute in school. I ended up starting playing rugby in college because I went to a Division III school, and frankly, my high school team could have beat them. And I had a hard enough time being a student. So, but it's an interesting question. Anybody I could draft from the business world? Is that what you mean? Like, is that the?
So you're going to draft someone from a football team, and I have an answer to this question because I think that by definition, the position lends itself to what you guys.
All right, so I want to hear what you think.
So I'd say middle linebacker because this is.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's a read and react position. You got to know what's going on around you, and it's not just forward or sideways or back. It's 360.
I see what you're saying. I didn't know where you were going with that. I still think my answer is good.
I like that.
But it's. I guess, not understanding your question, I'd say we're probably like a center. We get the absolute crap kicked out of us. They're typically, I'm a big Jason Kelce fan, but like super reliable, get beat up, keep going. They really have to run 10 feet really hard over and over and over again. Their uniform is filthy at the end of every single game. And, that's kind of they're not glory guys. They're usually not the guys that are on the Wheaties box or, they're not flashy. They usually drive it in their F-150. They're pretty humble, a pair of jeans. They're not wearing fancy clothes, walking into the locker room. And that's kind of our business. At one time I had to go to Bring Your Dad to Work Day, and I went behind a Sikorsky aircraft helicopter guy and in front of the guy that built Maroon 5's website. I was like, my dad's in procurement. Like, it's not sexy, but it's reliable. It's tough. It gets beat up and keeps coming back. So I'd probably say a center.
So I'm going to finish with this because this is a great way to ask how you finished your meetings. Because, when I hear the story, you're combating a bunch of things that had nothing to do with common sense. It's Party 99. It's people being territorial and saying, "Hey, boss, we don't need these guys." So when you leave a meeting and you say it, and you've had your chance to do your PowerPoint, whatever you do, your presentation, and you're with the CFO, CPO, and you say, "So listen, if you remember nothing else," how do you finish that sentence?
So I do it all the time. It's a great question. So I'll say to them, look, if you remember nothing else, if I'm selling you anything, rich with benchmarks and empirical data, and prove to you that we can take somewhere between 6 and 16% out of what should be 20% of revenue in terms of indirect procurement. And if I can't prove to you that I'm right, and I can't prove to you that you need me to go get it.
That's great. Well, listen, thanks for spending this hour with us. This has been awesome, learning about LogicSource, and I look forward to following its progress.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. For everybody watching and listening, this is John Podby with Smarter Sourcing, and we'll see you on the next episode.